Welcome in to the Arkansas Sports Network's Hometown Sports Football Preview, proudly presented by Arkansas Tech University, D3 Auto Sales, and by Metcalf Trucking Company. Today, the ASN crew previews Class 4A.
Welcome back to the classification previews brought to you by the Arkansas Sports Network. This is Class 4A, and you see it's a little bit different. We kind of had a boo-boo, and we're doing this a little bit differently. Unfortunately, the other guys couldn't join us, so it's going to be me and Carson talking it up. 4A football. Carson, you have done such a great job on the Hometown Sports Arkansas football preview, and we appreciate everything that you've done along with the other guys as well. First year doing this, and we'll work some of the kinks out and try to get it going again next year. But man, we appreciate what you've done. We appreciate what you've done for this as well, as you've laid a lot of notes out for us, helped us out. And man, we're excited about high school football coming up on Friday night, as we will be in Jonesboro for the Jonesboro-Conway game and all the things that brings. And glad to have you here, man.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a really enjoyable summer being able to do all these different things, and looking forward to Friday night getting high school football kicked off. I'll be at the Conway Christian Hazing game, and both of those teams are ranked in the top 10 in our ASN rankings. So I'm excited. I've been excited for that game. Looking forward to that for some time, but that Jonesboro game should be an exciting one as well.
Right off the bat, a top 10 matchup in 2A between Conway Christian, who has state title hopes, and Hazen, who always has state title aspirations as well. And Conway and Jonesboro, neither one of those are 4A, so we're going to talk 4A ball here. And we can go ahead and promote ourselves a little bit and say, hey, buy tickets. We'll put the link here in the description. Buy tickets to the ASN Classic coming up between Elkins and Warren. It not only helps Arkansas Sports Network, but helps both schools, as a cut of the proceeds will go back to both schools. And so the more tickets that we can sell to that, the better off it is for everybody. So we're excited about that coming up September the 13th. And that is going to be, according to us, a top 3 matchup in the 4A. Now, I will say Elkins has got to get past Dardanelle before that happens. Dardanelle is solid football team. So before Warren, they've got to get through Dardanelle. But if everything holds, it will be a top 3 matchup in the 4A between Elkins and Warren. And man, we're excited about being a part of that. But let's just get into the class previews here, Carson, and let's just talk some 4A football. Do you want to start in 4A1?
Yeah. So first of all, the ASN Classic, because Elkins is in this conference. We can, I guess we can talk about that a little bit. Nate Olson put that game in his top 25 games of the season. So, a lot of excitement, not just from the people here, but from around the state. People are looking forward to that game. And so Elkins, they're the team to watch in this conference. I have Lincoln 2, Prairie Grove 3, Gentry 4, Gravette 5, Green Forest 6, Berryville 7, Huntsville 8. And again, those are my personal rankings. Those aren't the ASN rankings for the conference. But Elkins, I think, is the heavy favorite to win this conference, just because of what they were able to do last season. Played a really close game against Harding Academy in the playoffs, and came up short. But the potential is there. Coach Watson over at that program has done a terrific job in building it in that Northwest Arkansas area. And then Lincoln, another team from that Northwest Arkansas area, who I think is going to have a great opportunity to build off of being in Northwest Arkansas. We've seen a lot of teams from that area grow into some serious contenders: the Fayettevilles, the Bentonvilles, the Shiloh Christians, and then the list goes on. So a lot of competition in that area, but I think that those two teams will benefit from it, from being in that area a lot. moving into Prairie Grove, that's a team that their coach has been there for some time. I know Jaran did that interview, I believe, but that coach has been there for some time. He's had a lot of time to lay that groundwork. A lot of people are really high on them this season. I think they're going to have a good season. I would tend to agree with that. And then moving down, that 4 spot could be a little bit competitive with Gentry Gravett. But to me, Gentry is that 4 team, and those would be the 4 teams that I would put in the playoffs. I believe is it 4 or 5 that we get in 4A?
Well, you get 5. You get 5 in the 4A. So that top 5, Gravett, Gentry, Prairie Grove, Lincoln, and Elkins. I think those are probably safe as far as playoff teams go. You got the Green Forest, Berryville, and Huntsville. Usually there's a pretty good separation between that top 5 and those last 3 there. So I feel like that, that 4-5 spot is always a dogfight. I really think Prairie Grove moving back from 5A to 4A got a shot to come up into that number 2 spot. Coach Abshire over there does a great job. And, man, they're always very competitive. They came out of 5A, made the playoffs last year in 5A. And so I really think they've got a chance to kind of get up into that 2 spot. I do think Elkins is the class of that 4A1 right now. Seems to be the best overall program in that 4A1, not because they're in part of the ASN Classic, by the way, but because they really play good football up there. They've really taken a step over the last 5 years. It hasn't just been like this year. You've seen Elkins just kind of making that climb, and now they're right up there as the team in the 4A1, and so I like them. I like them a lot. Their medal is going to be tested when they play Dardanelle. Their medal is going to be tested when they play Warren. I actually don't have their schedule pulled up. I'll pull that up real quick here. Besides that, but Dardanelle, and I don't want to get too far into the 4A because or 4A4. We'll talk about them in a minute. But Dardanelle played pretty good football last year in the 5A. They were just a hair away from making the playoffs. Few points here and a few points there. So I think that they've got a chance to really make some noise. And so I think they're going to test Elkins pretty early.
Yeah. This conference seems to be pretty cut and dry as far as the 5 playoff teams that should be in there. Of course, there is such a thing as surprise teams, so you never know who could have a good season. But I think that, Elkins, Lincoln, Prairie Grove, Gentry, Gravett, those are kind of the 5. Those other programs have struggled the last few years, just getting things going. I know that there's a lot of teams that are in that Northwest Arkansas area. They're just, it is hard to compete. There are teams that benefit and teams that don't. Green Forest and Berryville, those kind of teams. If they can find their footing in that area of the state, I think they have a chance to really put together a program. But at this point, they're still trying to build their programs there. So
did that come over the speakers there? I apologize. I pulled up SB Live there, pulled up Elkins' schedule, and their audio came over the screen there for just a second. I apologize for that. Just looking at Elkins' schedule, by the way, they did beat Pea Ridge. They've got it here on the scrimmage. They beat them 28-7 in the scrimmage. They've actually got Miami, Oklahoma to start the year, August the 30th. They're at Miami. And then they are versus Dardanelle on the 6th and the 13th versus Warren. And then they're at Gentry, Berryville, Lincoln, or at Gentry, then versus Berryville at Lincoln. That Prairie Grove game on the 18th of October, that's going to be a fun one to look at Green Forest versus Gravett at Huntsville, which Huntsville and Huntsville and Elkins really only about 20 miles away on Highway 74. So pretty good, decent little rivalry there, or used to be. Those two teams kind of separated now. But anyway, we feel like Elkins, pretty good spot. Like you said, we feel like the 5 teams that make the playoffs there, Elkins, Lincoln, Prairie Grove, Gentry, and Gravett, most likely out of that spot. And of course, you can probably take at least 3 of those and kind of move them around and possible playoff positioning there, but feel like pretty good about those 5. Let's move on into the 2-4A. The 2-4A here, we've got Little Rock Mills is a team that is made in our top four in the 4A in our first poll. And of course, they deserve that. I mean, I think that they can be considered one of the very top contenders in the 4A this year as they dropped from 5A. They had really good success over the last few years in 5A. Now they get a chance to play 4A football, where they played 4A basketball over the last few years and had some good success there. They seem to be above and beyond everybody else in the 2-4A. You know, before all of the losses there at Central Arkansas Christian, you would have said that would have been a dogfight there in that conference, but Mills seems to be the top dog there. Then you've got Lone Oak, Heber, Forest City, Little Rock Hall, Bald Knob, and Riverview as your conference standings there in the 2-4A.
Yeah. Little Rock Mills is the team to beat in that conference just because of some of the losses that CAC's had and the program that they've built over at Mills. You know, last season they had Charleston Collins, 4-star defensive end, so they can put up some prospects. And then, you know, aside from that, you move into CAC, they lose Grayson Wilson, which is big, but they're not going to be a cupcake. Coach Plumley over there, he's you know, really optimistic about his program. Even with some of the players that they've lost to the, you know, quote unquote transfer portal in high school football, you know, they've still got some really talented players over there. They've got a really talented running back named Reynolds Sullivan, who's you know, got a lot of things you want in a running back. And Coach Plumley is a running backs coach, coached Jalen Dupree at Malvern, and you know, really maximized his abilities and made him a superstar that got some national attention now playing at Colorado State. And so, you know, moving on to Lone Oak, I put them pretty high because, you know, pretty much the public consensus, in my opinion, as well, is that Coach Benberg is the guy for the job over there. Was offensive coordinator at Parkview for a number of seasons, knows how to handle a lot of talented players on the same team, and knows how to build talented rosters. And he's, you know, he's got, from what he's told me, he's got a lot of support from that program, and they're really excited to have him there. Moving on to Heber Springs, they lose their head coach from last season. Van Pascal moves on to Cross County, and that's a team that I think went 5-5 last season with Pascal there, but that was an improvement for them. And then they bring in Caleb Carmichael. Coach Carmichael is a Heber Springs native, and he's another guy that people are really excited about. You know, a lot of people on social media are saying that Heber Springs is underrated. So interested to see how they adjust to a new head coach. Forest City, another team with a new head coach. A lot of teams with new head coaches in this conference. You know, CAC, Lone Oak, Heber Springs, Forest City. Coach Reggie Swinton over at Forest City is the new head coach over there. He has implemented a completely new system, new culture over there. He told me that he really admires what Deion Sanders does with being able to get kids a lot of attention from you know, whether it's through social media, whether it's through, you know, just being able to turn these kids into special players. But he said that the culture there and the conditioning there and the workouts there were not up to his standard. So I'm really interested to see what that team looks like. They're moving down from 4A to from 5A. So I think Forest City is going to have a much better season than they had last year. And then Little Rock Hall, Coach Withrow, he's a guy that's been around. He knows the Arkansas football landscape. And talking with him, he's getting a lot more support from his boosters and such that they weren't getting before. And so, you know, he's really excited about the state of his program. Feels like they could have made a push for the playoffs had it not been for some injuries last season. So, you know, and then moving on to Bald Knob and Riverview, those two teams, you know, haven't had a lot of success, but, you know, there's always surprise teams every year. I know that we did a hometown sports for Bald Knob. So, you know, I got to be honest, I'm not super familiar with that team. I did interview a lot of teams such as Forest City, CAC, Lone Oak, and Hall in this conference. So I'm a little bit more familiar with them. But, you know, and so that's why I ranked them as high as I did, because I do feel confident from what I've heard from their coaches. But those two teams at the bottom, Bald Knob and Riverview, that I have ranked at the bottom. You know, I think it will be a competitive conference, so we'll just have to see how it all plays out for those guys as well.
I like. I think Little Rock Hall could possibly make a playoff push. The athletes are there at Hall. It's all about trying to get them going in the same direction. If they get a coach in there, maybe Withrow is the man to do that. Also think allowing them to go into a conference that might be just a shade easier than what they had last year, I think helps them a little bit. I think that you could probably throw them in the Forest City into that mix as in that 5 spot. Heber is coming off a coaching switch again. Van Pascal is one of the very best coaches in the state of Arkansas. Caleb Carmichael, don't know a ton about Caleb Carmichael. He was at Rising last year. We know he is from Heber Springs, and so he's getting a chance to go back home. We'll be keeping an eye on them. Clay Bimberg at Lone Oak, as you said, he's had a chance to play and be around some of the very best athletes. Lone Oak has had success in the past in football, and so we'll be seeing what happens there. Mills and CAC, I think Mills is a cut above the rest, and then I think CAC is your number 2 spot as well, as you have them there. Let's move on to the 3-4A there. Batesville Southside, which we don't call them that. They don't like that. It's actually Southside Charter. I need to probably edit that out. But anyway, Southside Charter, Highland, Gosnell, Pocahontas, Blytheville, Truman, Cave City, and Jonesboro Westside are your order there in the top 8. I think that you and I can both agree. I really like Southside in 4A with moving down from 5A. They went 10-2 last year. I know they've got a lot returning on defense. And then another, you want to talk about one of the better coaches in the state, Coach Kenny Simpson, is really, he's well known, not just here in Arkansas, but in the nation. A very prominent coach, runs the gun tee. They do a good job of having a system, knowing a system, and doing that system. And they have really been successful over there at Southside with him there. Highland is a team that brings back a ton of players. I believe they bring back 18 starters, all 11 starters on offense. And then on defense, they bring back 7 or 8, I believe. Gosnell, got a ton of athletes. Pocahontas, they're always tough. They're just a tough team. Blytheville's got athletes. Truman, I think Truman's in that mix there for that 5 spot there. Cave City and Jonesboro Westside. Cave City struggled for several years now. I know that they're talking about wanting to make the playoffs. That was one of their things, one of their goals this year on the Hometown Sports. And then I actually get a chance to interview Jonesboro Westside tomorrow, so I'll know a little bit more about them.
Yeah. If it wasn't for Southside moving down and having such success in 5A last year, Highland would be the number 1 team here with all the success they've had, and then bringing back so many players, would be hard to argue with that. And then it's just that Southside is just the exception in this case, where they're first of all, everybody and their grandmother has confidence in Kenny Simpson as a head coach, it seems like. So, it's a good situation for them to be in. And this conference, Highland is the number 2 team to me because of what I mentioned previously about them just having a lot of returning production and a lot of things to build on at that school and that program. And Pocahontas and Gosnell and Blytheville and Truman, Cave City, Jonesboro Westside, those guys. In my opinion, this is a conference where some of those playoff spots could be a little bit more up for grabs than in some others. But, to me, I don't think that anybody would argue that it's Southside and Highland in the top 2 right there. And then the other order could be a little bit more, you could switch it around a little bit more if you wanted. But to me, those are the 2 teams that lead the pack there, and those are the 2 teams out of that conference that I think have a really good shot at making a deep playoff run this season. And then a lot of those teams, the Pocahontas, Blytheville, those guys believe those are some Northeast Arkansas teams. So they're all competing sometimes for the same players and sometimes for the same rivalry trophies and things of that nature. So, it's going to be interesting to see how those games play out between those teams and how the playoff race shakes out in the 3-4A.
Moving on to the 4-4A, we've talked a little bit about Dardanelle already. We feel really good about Dardanelle. You've got them as the one in this conference. Ozark right behind them. I know in our poll in the 4A, they actually were 6 and 7 together. I think Ozark actually might have, or 7 and 8. Ozark might have been just a notch above them. Clinton, Lamar, Pottsville, Mena, Waldron, Dover. This is a conference I'm very familiar with. Number one, we own the Pottsville live stream, and so we do Pottsville games. Very familiar with Pottsville. Lamar, very familiar. Coach Josh Jones, one of the most underrated coaches in the state of Arkansas, really does a great job over there at Lamar. Clinton is always solid, very, very tough, very, very hard-nosed. They had some losses last year, though, so I wonder how they'll overcome those. Ozark Hillbillies got the most tradition of anybody in the conference. And Dardanelle has had tradition now basically since Josh Price was there back in 2006, I believe, is when he got there. Waldron and Dover definitely have a mountain to climb when it comes to that. And then Mena is a very, very good team with Coach Bentley over there, a very good program. That one of 6 teams there, there's going to be a good team that's going to be left out of the playoffs.
Yeah. I believe Pottsville was in the situation last year where they came within a couple inches of making the playoffs, and it just, went the other way. And they ended up missing. They run an option system over there, very run heavy offense, I believe, at Pottsville. And they're gonna be a physical group, and this conference seems to have a lot of teams that are gonna have some physical groups. So if Pottsville can out physical people per se, I think they're gonna have a good shot at making the playoffs, and that's why I put them there, is because I think in a physical conference they could be one of the more physical teams. Then Dardanelle is going to be another team that's going to be physical. Obviously, the superstar there is Creed Vega, the dual threat quarterback, son of head coach Phil Vega. And he's the guy that everybody loves talking about. Had over 1,000 yards passing and 1,000 yards rushing last season. So he's going to be hard to stop. And then moving on to Ozark, a lot of people do have Ozark listed as their favorite in this conference. To me, Dardanelle just has the Creed Vega factor. To me, he's one of the most special players in Class 4A. That's why I put them over Ozark, and I also think that Phil Vega does a terrific job coaching there.
Let me say something here. This conference, actually, if you throw quarterbacks in this conference, really good quarterbacks here with Vega, Will Banks, and Miller Mahan of Pottsville. All 3 of those players could definitely make up 3 of the top 5 quarterbacks in 4A. I think you got to throw Jackson Denton in there as a possibility from Warren. There's some other kids.
Eli Perry, Boxside.
Yes, the Price kid at Stuttgart. But you're talking about 3 very, very good quarterbacks in the 4A right there in that conference.
Yeah. Of course, Mena, Waldron, Dover. It's such a tough conference. Dover's a program that's fallen on hard times, and Coach Cox has a game plan over there. We'll see if they can execute it. Just it is a really competitive conference. Some of those playoff seeds could be interchangeable as they were last season. But to me, this is one of the more competitive conferences in Class 4A. It all depends on who can be. I think to me in this conference, it's who's more physical every week. Yeah. If you're the more physical team week in and week out, then you're going to have a better shot at winning at the ball game on Friday night.
That's going to be a fun one to watch. The last 2 seasons, that has come down to tie break points. You mentioned Pottsville. Pottsville actually was 3 yards away from winning the conference last year. Now, you got to add what CAC and Bauxite were in the conference last year. You got to add Ozark and Dardanelle and replace those guys. But they ended up not making the playoffs at all. had they scored within 5 yards, they lost by 1 point to CAC. They would have won the conference and had a bye in the playoffs, I believe. That's how crazy that was. And I'm looking here on the schedule real quick because in the conference, you got to think that the game of the year in the conference, Dardanelle versus Ozark, Friday night, October the 25th. That might be one that ASN looks at as a possibility. Ozark Hillbillies and Dardanelle Sand Lizards there. They've actually got a pretty tough back-to-back-to-back schedule at Clinton versus Lamar and versus Ozark. They're in 3 in a row. So that's going to be a lot. That's going to test them a lot. But I'll tell you one thing about Dardanelle, very well coached, very physical. They're very physical. They're very physical at the point of attack. They do a very, very good job there over there. Let's move on to the 7-4A here. The belle of the ball, if you would say, I would say this is the Bauxite Miners. You know, a lot of times you move from the 4-4A to the 7-4A, you're definitely not going to be a favorite because the 7-4A has been the conference, in my opinion, over the last, I don't know how many years, several years now, that has been the toughest in the state in 4A. Maybe not quite as tough this year, but you got Bauxite at the top, Arkadelphia, Nashville, Malvern, Haskell, Harmony Grove is your top 5. And then you got Ashdown, and then you got Fountain Lake, Genoa Central, both those teams. Moving up from 8-man, that's a hard road to hoe there. As you're moving up from 8-man, you get stuck in the toughest conference in 4A.
Yeah, Bauxite to me is the favorite here. A lot of people like Arkadelphia, and I wouldn't fault them for that. I just think that Coach Perry at Bauxite does a really good job in most important facets of coaching a football team. Always puts up a really, really physical team every year, and he's got some really talented players on his team. Exhibit A is Marcus Wimberly, the Oklahoma commit, one of the top players in the state without a doubt. And then his son is the quarterback, Eli Perry. I think he started as a freshman last year and going into his sophomore season. So after having a season of senior high football under his belt, I think that he's going to have a much better season than he did last year, and he did pretty well for himself last year. And he's made it on a couple of lists of some of the top quarterbacks in the state as a sophomore. So he's a really impressive player. And then moving on to Arkadelphia, that's a team that past 10 years or so has had some really tough playoff matchups. I remember they played Harding Academy a couple of years ago and got knocked out in a close one. And then Nashville's a team that's got a new head coach this year, I believe, and he's really passionate about Nashville football. He in his hometown sports interview, you could really tell he cares about that program a lot. And then that's another team, the Nashville Scrappers. They earn their name. They're a scrappy team every year. They're going to go out and they're going to claw and fight and they're not going to give up easy on any given Friday. Okay. Moving on to Malvern, they have a new head coach this year. JD Plumley is off to CAC, and they bring in Coach Fogelman, John Fogelman, I believe is his name, from Catholic. And I believe that's his second stint at Malvern. And Bishop Allen is their quarterback. They lose Jalen Dupree to the college game, but I think Bishop Allen's going to be a guy that's got a lot of potential to really have a really good season. Another one of those guys you could throw in there as one of the top quarterbacks in Class 4A. And then moving on to Harmony Grove Haskell, I put them in that 5 spot because I do believe that they are a more polished team than Ashdown or Fountain Lake or Genoa Central. Ashdown's going to have an uphill climb with a new head coach. It is difficult unless you already have a foundation built with a new head coach to really have a lot of success in year one. Not saying it can't be done because it's happened before, but new head coach typically means there's some growing pains and there's an adjustment period and whatever phrase you want to throw in there. So to me, that's why I put Ashdown at 6, and then Fountain Lake, Genoa Central. Fountain Lake moves up from the 8-man ranks. There's going to be an adjustment there as well. And Genoa Central, It's just a program that's trying to rebuild right now. So that's why I have those teams ranked the way I do. And um, I think that you could throw Bauxite and Arkadelphia interchangeably at the 1-2 spot, and I wouldn't argue with you. But I think that Bauxite's the team to beat in that conference this season.
I think Nashville is a team that can make a little bit of noise this year. I'm interested to see where we're looking at the possible Nashville and Arkadelphia matchup coming up. I think September the 27th, if I'm not mistaken. They're at Nashville. All right, 8-4A. We have Warren, Stuttgart, DeWitt, Hamburg, Monticello, Crosset, Star City, and Central West Helena. To me, this is one of those conferences very, very tough from top to bottom. I mean, there's a lot of good athletes in this conference. Warren, to me, is a cut above the rest. I know that we got a ton of hate last year from Warren. They said, y'all hate Warren. We're better than Elkins, blah, blah, blah. You know how it goes. It turned out that it wasn't that way, but we feel good about Warren this year. Second year quarterback Jackson Denton stepping in. He just absolutely tore it up last year as a freshman. He was my favorite for our newcomer of the year. He did not win that. Corey Graham actually won that, who is from DeWitt. So there's a lot of good young talent in that conference.
Yeah, Warren is a step above everybody else. I don't think that you'd find much of an argument from that unless you were a coach at one of the other 7 teams. But to me, Warren is the top dog in that conference, and Antonio Jordan, Jackson Denton, those two are like Brady and Moss. I mean, they're just it's a great quarterback and a great receiver, and they know their tendencies. They've had a year to work together. And then moving on to Stuttgart. Stuttgart's a team that, like many in the 4A, are going to have a physical group every year. They got some good athletes over there. DeWitt has Corey Graham. Corey Graham is a difference maker. He's a impact player for DeWitt. I have them at 3 because I'm really high on him. I think that he's a terrific player. Hamburg is a team that a lot of people have really high, that a lot of people think will have a good season. I think they're going to be a playoff team for sure. I don't know that they'll be in that top 3, but they're going to have a good season. Monticello is a team that I think will sneak into that 5 spot there. And then, you get down to Star City, Crosset, Central West Helena. Star City is a team with a new head coach. Chris Norton is the new head coach over there. So they are going to have an adjustment period, some growing pains, et cetera. And so, I put those 5 in there because I feel like they are going to have those are the 5 best teams. Of course, sometimes the 5 best teams don't make it into the playoffs. There are some other circumstances, but to me, those are the 5 best teams. And to me, Warren is at number 1, and that's they're just, I think they're going to dominate the conference, and I think they're going to dominate for some time. They might have a couple hiccups, but that's going to be the team to beat in that conference this season.
If it was me, I would flip Stuttgart and DeWitt. I think Crosset has had a really good run over the last few years, and really a team that could jump up in there into that mix. Definitely, I think that your top 6 are good. Star City's got athletes out just running out of everywhere, man. I mean, they're really have a ton. So, I mean, you can't count them out. With the right system and the right coach, the right motivation, you can get them and get them going in the right direction. They've had very successful years. I'll say this about Star City. They have pockets of really good years. But anyway, being in the 4A8, though, it doesn't help them much. If they were in another conference, kind of like the Razorbacks, if they were in another conference, you'd say, man, they could be pretty good. Let's move on here. You had your 4A offensive player of the year. You had Antonio Jordan of Warren. I think Jackson Denton is definitely one to mention there. Corey Graham is another one. There's a litany of guys that we could mention. I mean, when you're talking about 4A offensive player of the year, of course, that a lot of times that usually goes to the best player on the best team. Jordan is the one that probably has the most athletic ability, definitely the highest college ability there. You'll probably be talking about Antonio Jordan for years to come. But when it comes down to it, when we look at the D3 Auto Sales MVP, we don't just look at who's been recruited the most. We look for who's had the best year, who put up the best numbers. How did that come about? Maybe they weren't on as talented of a team, but they put on just massive numbers. There's all kinds of factors that we look at that. But Antonio Jordan is one of those guys. Defensively, Marcus Wimberly of Bauxite is a guy that you've got as your defensive player of the year.
Yeah. I think that another guy that I would throw into the offensive player of the year conversation is Renelson Sullivan at CAC, just because I think that Coach Plumlee does a terrific job coaching running backs. And if he can coach him to be anywhere near the level of a Jalen Dupree, then you could throw his name in that conversation as well. And Bishop Allen at Malvern, I'm really high on him as well. Defensively, Wimberly is. I think he's the guy. I think that he's the one that's a cut above everybody else. There's some other names you could throw in there, but to me, now with Wimberly being as highly recruited as he is, there's a reason for it. And going to an SEC school like Oklahoma and having offers from multiple SEC schools such as the Razorbacks, he's the one to beat for that top player in Class 4A defensively this season.
Yeah, I mean he's definitely got the most talent there. We are running out a little bit of time here, so let's get to it. I think we can get it in. Let's talk about our champion. Maybe who would play against them with 1 minute to go in our Zoom here. We've got, I think Warren is a team that we like a lot as the team to beat. I think that you can probably throw Arkadelphia, Mills, Southside, Dardanelle, and Elkins in that top notch as far as maybe who can challenge them.
Yeah, I'd say give me a Warren Bauxite championship game, assuming the bracket works out that way. And then my sleeper team to make it far this season would be the Lone Oak Jackrabbits. I think Coach Benberg's going to do a terrific job there, and I think that I think he's a really great offensive coach. So I think they're going to have a better season than most would expect, and I think that they could be a team that could surprise some people this year.
Well, we're going to wrap this up. This has been your 4A classification preview from the Arkansas Sports Network, and you can buy tickets to the ASN Classic right here in the link below, and we're going to have to wrap this thing up very quickly. So, Carson, thank you for joining us. We'll see you guys on Friday night when we are at Jonesboro as Conway travels to Jonesboro.
Thanks again for joining us on the Arkansas Sports Network's Hometown Sports Football Preview. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the Arkansas Sports Network on YouTube to catch more previews and all the latest updates on your favorite teams. It's the ASN Classic, Elkins versus Warren, September the 13th. Tickets are available at the link in the description.